Okay, let's continue on top of the Amud Gimel Amud Aleph, Lishna Achrina. So it's somewhat of a chazara of yesterday's daf, because the Lishna Achrina on the top of the page is going to be very similar to what we saw the other Lashon, just the opposite direction. So Lishna Achrina, let's just clarify. Gimel Amud Aleph, the first line on top of the Amud. Lishna Achrina, literally from the third word.
Oh yeah, the third word.
The third word, Lishna Achrina. So we had a question. What is the terminology of the word Hashutvin Sheratzu Lasos Mechitza? What does Mechitza mean? Does it mean a Mechitza the way we think today means like a partition, like a beautiful wall? Or it means division. We're separating, like Chetzi Lachem. You get half the pot, I get half the pot. Like more of a division. So today we're going to work with the mechitza. We're trying to push the agenda. The mechitza doesn't mean a wall, it means a division. So let's see it. Lishna Achrina. Amrila. Another version is as follows. Savrua mai mechitza. What is the terminology of the word mechitza? Pelukta. Kedichsiv, like we saw yesterday, the same pasuk, the same verse. Vatihi mechsa sa'ida. When we're talking about splitting up the spoils of the war, they got to divide it. And therefore, what would the implication be? The kiv on the ratzu, now they agreed to divide. The chatzer, even though there was no stipulation that they will build a wall, because once you decide to split the chatzer, now you must put up a wall, because that's what the Mishnah is saying. Hashot and Sheratzuz Lasa Mechitza means partners, the people that want to split up their yard, Bainin es HaKaisel. That's the continuation of the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah says Bainin es HaKaisel. Elamai, the Mishnah is telling you, you must build a wall. Therefore, it's a Raya, Alma Hezek, Riyah, Shemei Hezek. Therefore, our Mishnah is telling us a beautiful halacha. That we see the concept, well, again, like we said yesterday already, we're not arguing on the concept of Hezek Riyah. Hezek Riyah means Ayin Hara. More than Ayin Hara, could also mean it's not pleasant. I'm trying to do personal activities, and you're looking into my backyard, into my front yard, or there's no looking in because there's no wall. That's something that we as Yidden, we accept it as halacha to a certain degree that you should expect to have privacy. So, frek the Gemara, like the opposite of what we went yesterday. Maybe the word mechitza means guda wall. How do we know this? Like we saw yesterday's raya from Kalayim. Does everyone remember the raya? The halacha is a Kalayim. There has to be a kaisel in between the vineyard and the grain field. And the situation was that the kaisel fell and he left. The owner of the vineyard said, I'm not building the wall. The second it grows 1/200th of grain, it becomes kalayim, and the Baal vineyard is chayiv to pay. But the point we're bringing that over there, the word over there by Karim says the word mechitza, and there 100% we're talking about a wall. So let's go through it. The Tanan or the Tanya, yesterday we went to Tzabraisa, mechitza sakem shenifritza. We have a wall, that there's a vineyard and a grain field in between. Aymer legedar. The owner of the field, or Bezdin, tells him, build it. Nifritza. Aymer legedar. Eventually gave up, erased the Kiddush, so here clearly the terminology mechitza means a wall. Does not mean a division. And therefore the implication would be it's only because we agree to put up a wall. But if we do not specifically agree, you cannot force me to build a wall. Alma hezek riyah, lav shmei hezek, and therefore the implication would be otherwise, that hezek riyah is not considered hezek, and you cannot compel me to put up a wall. Frek the Gemara.
But if you're saying that there's a grain field in between, so that should be enough of a separation. And therefore, one person says, I don't have to put up a wall.
So we explained this yesterday. We'll quickly chazer this. But the reason why I didn't go in depth about Kilei HaKerem, because we went through it very, very extensively yesterday. But I'll give you a brief review of what's going on so you understand what's the mechitza. The halacha is, if you have a vineyard and you have grain next door to each other, touching each other, such a thing called Kilei HaKerem, it's kalayim. Therefore, usually you have to have daled amas, 4 amas between the vineyard and the grain. The reason why you need 4 amas is in order for the horses or the cows, whatever the animals, to be able to go around the fields and do their work. However, there is a loophole, which is as long as you put up a partition, a full partition that's blocking the field and the vineyard from growing, from touching each other, you don't need daled amas. So there's no space in between. That's a beautiful, it's a wall. Now, if the wall breaks, who's obligated to fix it? The vineyard, because the vineyard is something that spreads. They're the one who's going into the Kilei Karim. That's the issue, is always the vineyard's fault. Therefore, over here, the talks about that if he doesn't want to build it, eventually, the second the grain grows, it becomes Kalaim, because there's no daled amas. So that's the halacha. But the point we're bringing out is that we clearly see the terminology. The word mechitza means partition. It does not mean division. By Kalaim, there's only the heter is a mechitza of a wall. That was the raya of mechitza. And so let's go back to what we're saying. So the Gemara is bothered by this. If you're telling me that we're talking about a mechitza means a wall, which means to say is, again, like if you read the Mishnah, we're going to say the Mishnah outside, it says, partners that would like to build a wall, etc. You build a wall. That's repetitive, Frek the Gemara. Just say you build it. And we'll have a basic understanding. The word it is reflective on the previous sentence, which means a wall. Elamai, Frek the Gemara, you're going to tell me Pelukta? I don't like that either. Which means to say is, if you're telling me, it means divided. So why do we have a term, shutten, that want to make a division? It should say shutten, that want to divide. Why are you making it like more of a verb? Shutten shiratzu lachzais mechitza, to make, shutten, that want to divide it. For the Gemara, keda'amre inchi ta na'avid pelukta. For the Gemara, that is the popular expression. That's the way the people spoke. Therefore, you're 100% right. The Gemara is conceding that you could have easily said, let's make a division, let's split it up. Instead, we use more of a fancier term because that was the popular way of talking. So it's very interesting for us to
What did they say?
They said, let's make a division. The Gemara was bothered with that. You don't use such words. You say, let's divide. If we want to split a pot, right? Let's picture it. We want to split the money. Do we say, let's make a whole division? Or what do we tell each other? Let's divide it, right? That's the way of talk. That's the way we happen to. I think the way we talk is more, let's divide it. But the Gemara's days, it was the opposite. It's a verb. Right. And that was the way they spoke at the time. They made it like a whole fancy way of talking. So therefore we used it. Now, interesting, I want to point out that yesterday we asked the question the other direction. We asked, it should say, and we answered over there that we wanted to know the chiddush of a wall. We would have thought just boundary markers. In the Lishna Achrina, the Gemara is answering this question. Because yesterday we had the question the other direction. If we remember on Beis and Beis, the Gemara asked the question in the first Lashon, the Lishna Kama, that why does it say the Lashon of Bainis Akaisa Bainis Aisim Mivayle? The Gemara answered from Sepas Baham. Okay, now we're going to continue with Hezek Riyah. V'i Hezek Riyah Shmei Hezek. Now, if we're telling us that Hezek Riyah is truly considered damaging, my Irya Ratsu, why does our Mishnah have to tell us we're talking about partners who agreed to divide the Chatzar? Even in a scenario where they did not want to have come to agreement, it should be that each one has a right to put up a wall. What's the issue? I have a right to demand I want to divide the property and put up a wall. And for the Gemara, you know what our Mishnah is talking about? Mishnah Seinu Kashein Ba Din Chaluka. So we explained yesterday, in order to agree to split the wall, you have to at least have daled amas for each other. So times 2 would make it at least 8 amas. 8 amas by 4. But you would have to, the chatzar must be 8 amas. If the chatzar is 7 amas, you cannot compel me to divide our chatzar because we're talking about such small measurements. It's not substantial enough that I could agree to divide the chatzar. So our Mishnah is a chiddush. Our Mishnah is talking about that there's only 7 amas in the chatzar. V'hu deratzu, and the chiddush is that once you agreed to split up the chatzar, now you're compelled I could force you to build up a kaisel. So
Even though it's 7
even though it's 7 amas, frek the Gemara, my kamash malon, what are you coming to tell me? That why do you have to come onto a case of what? Of we're talking about 7 amas, and I agreed, and therefore you're compelled to build a wall. Dichi less based in chaluka kiratsu pligi. I could have an easier case for you. You're going to tell me that what? That shutvim, the chiddush is that once we commit ourselves, we can't go back about the wall. Tanina, I already have this clearly in a brisa, in a Mishnah, actually in Yud Aleph. Masai, when do we say that the karka is talking about you can't split it up as manchem shneim, right? And we're talking about a sada that does not have 8 amas. You don't want to split it. Avol bisman shneim, right? Afilu pachas mikan chalkin. There's a very clear Mishnah in Yud Aleph that tells me this halacha, that if it's pachas ches amas, which means to say there's not enough room for each to get 4 amas, as long as we want, we split it. So why does our Mishnah need to come to tell me this case and then tell me you're chayiv to build a wall? Say it in a simple case of you have plenty of amas and you want to split it. Why do you have to come onto a case Mishnah Seinu that doesn't have daled amas? Fan for the Gemara, if I would only have the Mishnah on Yud Aleph, Hava Amina, I might have thought, Afilu pachus mikan b'misepes ba'alma, which means to say is, I might have thought to myself, yes, you can split the karka if it's less than ches amas. However, I'm not obligated to put on a wall. I would only have to put on boundary markers. Boundary markers, we call let's say the 811 little flags or the little red cones outside. Nothing substantial, nothing that takes a lot of space, nothing expensive. More than expensive, it takes land space. What's your name, if I could ask? Julie. 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 Right. So we learned yesterday that we're not just giving the materials, we're also giving the land space, which we're going to go through later on. So we're going to chazer quickly the Mishnah of how many tefachim are each. There's different materials. There's something called gvil, gviz. We're going to go through it all. That's going to be worth a lot of money. And the land space is also worth a lot of money because we're not talking about such substantial lands. When you only have 4 amas and you have to give a half amma, that's already 1/12 of your property going towards the wall. So we're going to see that in a few moments. But the chiddush is, therefore our Mishnah comes to tell me that once you agree to split up the karka, you must put on a real wall, a substantial wall with expensive materials and land. So, frankly, a bomb question.
The Mexican border.
Yeah, it's a little cheaper. It's going to be a little cheaper than that, but...
As if they looked at this horror.
Yeah. Frak the Gemara v'lisni ha v'lei lisni hach. So let us only have our Mishnah on Daf Beis, which already explained to us that we're talking about a scenario where there's no ches amas, and the chiddush is that you have to build a wall. I don't need the Mishnah in Yud Aleph. What is the Mishnah in Yud Aleph coming to tell me? Which chiddush? Fam, for the Gemara, you're 100% right. There is no chiddush in the Reisha of the Mishnah. Seifa, it's Tuchile, the continuation of the Mishnah in Yud Aleph, which we're going to see very soon. It says v'kisve kodesh afa pisha shneim writes him layachloike, which means to say is chas v'sholem in a case where a mall, especially in those days, the Tanakh was all written up the way we have a Sefer Torah. So picture our Sefer Torah. We don't want to split up. Imagine a guy says, I want only Sefer Bereshis, you take Sefer Shemais. We don't split it up. When it comes to kisve kodesh, it's a bizayon. So you're right, fam, for the Gemara, that the Mishnah is not coming to tell me a chiddush regarding the ratio, because that we already know in Daf Beis and Aleph. Rather, the chiddush is about the sefer. Okay, now we're going to have a very variant text of our Gemara. Some say it wasn't, we shouldn't really learn it. Some say it wasn't. Let's just quickly stroll through this next Lishna Achrina that's in parentheses in our Gemara. Lishna Achrina, v'chiratzu my have lahad be'amar vasi omer v'yechlim shekona b'yada v'chula. Which means to say is, we have a Lishna Achrina. It's coming to tell us that we're going to talk about Kenyans. Let's see it. Instead of teaching us the chiddush that we don't have a ches amas, that's what it means. Ein badin chalukah means it's not enough of ches amas, and therefore we're talking about they agreed to divide it. And the chiddush is you're compelled to build a wall. Lishmina beyesh badin chalukah. Let our Mishnah talking about where there's plenty of space. V'afagav de loy ratzu, and even though they did not agree to divide, the halacha is the chiddush is you're mechoyev to divide the chutzner. Fan for the Gemara, if you're going to tell me we're talking about a case where there's many amas, I would have thought, so let's explain this. I would have thought that in a case where a chutzner is less than ches amas, I would have thought that in a chanami, I agree to split up the wall, split up the chutzner, even though it's not ches amas. However, I'm not obligated to put up a beautiful, expensive wall. I would have thought, again, like we said, I would have thought maybe boundary markers, kamashma in our Mishnah, that you must build a wall. So, frak Gemara, mi matzis amris hachi. Vaktani Seifa clearly says in the Seifa, Amasai, Bisman changed name, writes him when they do not both consent. Aval Bisman Shashneim writes him Yachlaiku. It's very clearly that you have to split up the wall. And my lava kaisel, and we're thinking, where do you have to build? What do you have to build? You have to build a wall. I would have thought, what do you have to build? You only have to build. You only have to do boundary markers. The chiddush by us is that once you split up a chutzner, even though it's not ches amas, so we're talking about a very small field, you still must put up a beautiful, expensive dalet amas partition. Okay. Frak the Gemara, listni high, v'loy listni high. So tell us our Mishnah in that Beis, and we don't need the Mishnah in Yud Aleph to tell us this. The Mishnah in Aleph is a regular. There's no chiddush over there, fam. For the Gemara Sefer, it's clear like we just explained earlier. In a chanami, there's no chiddush, but the chiddush is ubekisve hakadosh avav bishashneim writes lo yachloiku. The chiddush is for the Sefer that we don't split up Tanakh because it's a bizayin. Okay. Now we are going to go into.
Can I just ask, what does that mean, what you just said at the end?
With Kisai Kodesh?
Yeah.
So, like I explained, there used to be the Tanakh was in like a Sefer Torah.
What does Tanakh mean?
Tanakh means the Nevi'im Uksuva, not the Torah. So, the Nach is Yeshua, Shaiftim. We're actually going to see later on in the parak, I think it's Tezvavam and Beis, all the Svarim. So, it's Yudaudam and Beis, all the Svarim of Nevi'im. For example, Yeshua, Shaiftim, Shmuel, Malachim, Yirmiyah, Cheskel, Yeshaya, the Treyasar. We're going to go through it, but that is the Tanakh. That is Nach, which is Torah She Bal Peh.
I noticed that Baba Basra had 3 volumes in the English.
Correct.
And is that followed by the other 2 Babas?
No, so we just did Baba Kama, okay. Baba Metzia. Now we're at the last Baba Basra.
But the 3 go together.
It's a finale, I would say, yeah. It was Nezikin, we had Baba Kama, which talks about animals. Then we had Baba Metzia, which talks about Avedas and business partnerships. This is a continuation that we're going to start talking about the next level of ready people that are partners. How do we split up the properties? How do you get chazakas? Chazakas means that, once I buy a property, as long as I'm in my house for many years, we're going to go through contracts. If you lose a contract, we're going to go through kaychatainas. All the legal ramifications of ownership, various ownerships. Baba Maisa. Baba Maisa, I guess, is we're going to go through later on Baba Maisas. Okay. Baba Maisas after we've done all the Babas. Okay. Let's continue. The Gemara is still challenging this Rav Asi's din that wanted to say our Mishnah is talking about less than chesamas. Why do you have to come on to it? Frak the Gemara and Rav Asi, you're telling me that they didn't really legally have to split up the property because it was less than 8 amas. So frak the Gemara and Rav Asi, I don't understand something. If they agree, so what? I agreed today. I said, you know what? I thought about it overnight. I slept on it. I thought to myself, I got to be crazy. My field's not even 4 amas anymore. I can hardly put a chair in there to take a nice, beautiful, relax in the sun. I'm backing out. So frak the Gemara, I don't understand. What's the whole chiddush that I wanted to and I have to build a wall? You know what's going to happen if you decide to make me build a wall? I'm telling you, bye-bye. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm not building nothing. Let's go back to what we were originally, which were a regular partnership. So the fam for the Gemara, Amar Rav Asi, Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Asi himself offers an answer in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Shekanu miyadan, they actually made a real agreement that, that you cannot go retract. So what is a kinyan? Kinyan means a kinyan chalipin. Today, if we ever watch Mechiras Chametz, what they do is the guy, or even the person when I do Mechiras Chametz, the rabbi, the Rav makes me pick up a yarmulke. He makes me do a kinyan chalipin. But the question usually we find kinyan chalipin when we're talking about, for example, I want to buy your para, I want to give you my shar. We have this in Bayaz. That's where it comes from, this whole concept of kinyan chalipin. Is that the second I acquire it, you acquire my chayfetz. The second I pick up your object. Frak the Gemara over here, we're just words. We're not really buying anything because it's both of our yards. Kinyan dvarim ba'almuhu. Kinyan dvarim, we're not talking about to a tangible item. So for the Gemara, the first answer is Mishikanu biyadon meruchis, which means to say is, we walk over and we say, you know what? You take first dibs. You want the right side of the property or this left side of the property? The property, let's use the Gemara as the example. This is...
You do something like that. I mean, till now, each one owns a certain area.
No, they owned it together as a partner. Now they want to split it. They want to become, say, listen, I want my shares, you want your shares, so we split it. So I offer, I say, what do you want? You want take first dibs. You want the right side or the second side? The right side gets the sun in the morning. Let's make it easier to understand. The left side gets the sun in the afternoon. You decide. He says, I want the right side. No problem. And then we make a kinyan and it's finalizing who is getting which side of the property. So it's much more tangible because now that's what the chalipin is going on. Rav Ashi wants to say a little different teretz. Each one walks into their property and actually makes physically a chazaka. However, they bring down over here that Rav Ashi is not really making such a chiddush because chazaka, we all know chazaka, which we're going to learn later on in the Masechta, pashut that it works. That's what chazaka means, sitting into the property. So the chiddush is that when a person tells a person, go lech and go make a chazaka, it has to be in front of the person. That's what we're going to see in the Gemara later. The chiddush over here is it does not need to be in front of you. As long as I tell you, go make a chazak, Rav Ashi says it works over here because we're partnerships and we did a kinyan. Okay, now we're going to go back in the Mishnah where we discussed the materials. We're going through the material list. So to make it easier, the Mishnah on Daf Beis, we had 4 different types of materials. We had something called a gvil. A gvil, we touched it, rough edge stones, it's protruding. So brick it's very rough, so it's protruding. Gazis means it's smooth by now, they already cleaned it up. Kfisa means a half-size brick, and levena means a full-size brick. What are the ramifications? Measurements. We saw yesterday 5, 6, 3, 1.5. There are different types of measurements that are just going to end up being dependent on the material, and it's all based on the custom of the country. The Kakal Kaminiga Medina. Yes, it has to be 4 amas. And we're going to see the ramifications. Today we're going to learn a little about construction, about architectural, how certain heights and certain widths have to add up. We're going to learn a little about walls, that when it's the thicker it is, the higher you can go usually, right? Because you have a bigger, stronger foundation. So that's what we're going to focus on in the next few minutes, all about these measurements. So Makim Shenagu Livnais V'chule, the Mishnah said, depending on the custom of the materials. So what is a gvil? We did not explain it clearly inside yesterday what a gvil is. The Gemara wants to say gvil is avni deloi mishafya. It's stones that are not smoothed out. However, gazis is avni de mishafya. Where do we know this? Frak the Gemara, gvil avni. How do we know gazis is smooth stones? Dichsev, like it says in Melachim. We're talking about the avonim that we're going to use to the Beis Hamikdash. It says, "Kol eile avonim yekaros kemidais gazes." All these beautiful precious stones, according to the measures of what? Of the gazes. And there, that all, Rashi explains that all the stones, they were all smoothed out to fit a perfect, beautiful base of Mikdash. Shows clearly the base of Mikdash. That it was nice, smooth stones. So we see gazes is smooth stones. Kfisin, what are kfisin? Archi. Archi means a half-sized brick. Now, a half-sized brick is 1.5 tefachim and wide. So they were parallel to each other. Each, basically, they had a half a size brick. They put in between. Let's see if Perish Chai has the measure, has an illustration. But you have a half-size brick. You space a half a tefach in between the next half-size brick, and you fill it up with materials, with mortar or cheap materials. We'll see in a moment what type of materials that we're splitting it up with. I am trying to see here. Who's the Dafna? Kfisin is Levanin. No, they do not have. This is the base. Base of base. Here we go. Let's see it. Yes, they do. Okay. We're going to show over here, Kfisin is Archi, which means to say it's that, you see how over here the 1.5, this is the punchline. You see how these bricks are 1.5 instead of 3 tefachim. So it's like picture a brick, you slice it, beautiful slice in half the measurements. You put a space, you leave the space empty, then you put another half-size brick. What do you do in between the space? You fill it up with mortar. There we go. We're going to fill it up with mortar. So we're going to look at the measurements. Base is gazes. This is a smooth stone, right? Gvil, we see how it's roughed. Do we see how the stones are protruding on the sides? So it gives it a little more room. That's where there's an extra half a tefach. Avni l'meshapia, this is beautiful. Smooth stones. Smooth. And these are like with this measurement. So you're going to fill it up in between. Okay.
That's because there's nothing, it's not against anything.
It's the mortar is going to harden.
It's open. It's an open area. It's not against the wall or something.
Correct. It's in between the two fields. Correct. Okay. The Gemara is going to challenge all these measurements. How do we know? From where do we know that Gvil avni delay meshapyuninu? I know that gazes is smooth stones from the base of Mikdash, but how do I know that Gvil means unsmooth stones? And therefore, the high tefach yesera is l'mursha the kars. The mursha the kars means for the protruding edges. That's why there's extra tefach, because I have a tefach on each side. Delma palga the gazesu. Maybe Gvil just means a half of a smooth stones, and we know why there's extra tefach. The high tefach yesera leveinu urvihu. Let's say, just like we're telling us that by the half a brick we put in mortar, maybe it's the same thing. You have a smooth stone, a gazes means a half a smooth stone. Put in mortar and put another half a smooth stone. Where do we know that that gazes means a protruding stone? Where do we know that from? So right away, Rav Ashi challenges. So where do Kadam read? Just like Kfisin, Archilevain and Livni, just like we see that the high tefach is Levain Urview. Just I didn't say it inside, so I'm going to say it inside now. Just like we see it by the bricks, the half-size bricks. We're going to put in mortar in between. So Rav Ashi challenges Rabbah, and according to you, Kfis and Archi Minolan, how do we know that it means a Kfis, it means a half-size brick? Ella, you know the answer is Gemara Gemirla. We have a tradition. Gvil namni avni lo meshafyu Gemara Gemirla. So too, that Gvil, the tight, the translation of a Gvil to tell me that it means an unsmooth stone is also a Gemara tradition. That's what Gemara means. Just like the English language, everything is, someone had to create it. It's coming from Latin, but where did Latin come? Everything comes from a Lashon. Okay. Ikadamri. The Ikadamri is also very similar. It's just going the other direction. It's a different version. We're going to go through it a little quicker because it's just going the other way. How do we know the kfis in a half-size brick? And the extra half is for the mortar. Maybe what's it mean? Kfisin avni delay meshafyu. Bricks that are not smooth and they're protruding. The reason why you need extra tefach is for the protruding edges. Kedamrin, just like we see by Gvil, that Avli Lemeshapian, Gazis means a smooth stone, Avni the Meshapian, Vatefer Yiseir Lemusha and the Karas. No. How do you know that a kfisin means a half-size brick? Okay, just a different version. It's going the opposite way of learning. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. We're going to continue a practical halacha. We're going to continue weiter. Shma mina. Now that we see that the Mishnah tells us that a half-size brick needs extra tefach, so let's go through the measurements again. Let's quickly chazer the measurements of the Mishnah. What are the sizes that we must do in the Mishnah? Let's go through it again. By a gvil, we're saying by a gvil, which means rough edge stones, each one must give 3 tefachim each. Each partner gives 3 tefachim. By a gazis, each give 2.5, which equals 5. That means there's an extra tefach by the rough edges. By kfisin, each one gives 2, which is 4, and levanim, each one gives 1.5, which is 3. So we have 1.5, which is 3. We have 3. We have 4. We have 5 and 6. Different measurements of the stones. So, Frak the Gemara, Abaye wants to say, Shma Mino, that tells us that by half-size bricks, by levanim, we give an extra tefach. Kol beini urvi tefach. Elamai, we see from here that whenever you're pouring mortar, it's a space of a tefach, right? This is what we see very clearly. The black is the mortar, it's a tefach thick. However, hani mili betina. So what are we putting? What is the mortar? What is the mortar made out of? How strong is the material of the mortar? So we want to say, hani mili betina. Betina means pure mud. Pure mud was one of the eventually when it hardens and everything becomes extremely strong. Aval berichsa ba'itfei. If you want to mix it with little pebbles, then it's not as strong. You would need more than a tefach. The whole chiddush of the Mishnah tells me you need a tefach is only when it's pure, when it's strong material. You could army the other way around. Hani mili berichsa. You know when you need a tefach? Only when there's pebbles. Aval betina like baikulahai. If you're adding, if it's only going to be pure mud, which is a very strong material, you do not need a full tefach. Even less than a tefach is strong enough. Okay, we are going to continue now the measurements. Like I said, we are holding by the bottom of Gimel and Aleph. 4 lines from the bottom. I would say 7 words into the 4th line from the bottom of the amud. We are going to be talking about a little about architecture, how it works. Lememra. Yes, Lememra de Begazis. We all have it? Lememra de Begazis? Yeah. Okay. Lememra de Begazis, the Chol Arba Ameis Goiva, Ihava Pus Yocham Shekoi, Iloi Loikoi. Which means to say is, our Mishnah tells us, how tall is the kaisel? Dalit Amas. Doesn't it? It's always 4 Amas. How thick is the wall? By regular smooth stones? 5 tefachim. So we clearly see 5 tefachim could hold, the width of 5 tefachim could hold 4 Amas. So the Gemara wants to make a diak that if it would not be 5 tefachim, the wall would collapse. That's what we're thinking. That's why we need 5 tefachim. Frak the Gemara, v'ama traxin. So what is amatraxin? That word.
I would think that the taller it is, the weaker it is.
Correct. That's correct, and therefore you need a thicker wall. So that is true. That statement is totally correct. The taller it is, the weaker it is, and therefore you need you need to be much thicker. So what do we have now? What's our measurement in the Mishnah? Let's call it 5x4, which means to say is wall is 5 tefachim wide, could equal 4 amas high. 5 tefachim x4. However, so we're saying more than that, like you're saying, is too weak. But we see the amatraxin. So what is amatraxin? Amatraxin is coming from, it's a play on the words. Ama, we all know, ama means 6 tefachim. Ama is 6 tefachim, that's what it means. Trak means to close. Troik ali, Sin means close to Sinai. It's a little plain word. 6 tvachim close to Sinai. So it's actually good to remember how thick was the Amatraxin? The wall. So what was that wall? That was the wall that separated the base of Mikdash from the rest of the Heichal. It was in the Kodesh HaKodashim. There was a beautiful wall. How tall is it? We're going to see in a moment. How thick was it? It was an amma thick. So it was only 1 tefach extra than our Mishnah. But you know how tall it was? The Havagavaya Tlolsin Amasa. It was 30 amas high. So we're questioning 5x4, which means to say it's 5 tvachim thick, 4 amas wide. You ask any architectural, ask any engineer. Wait a second. So 5 amas equals 5 tvachim equal 4 amas. Then for 30 amas, you need way more than 5 amas. That's what we're understanding. That's what we're thinking. An engineer would tell us. Fan for the Gemara, that's not how engineering works. Kivan the ika tefach chisera. Once there's an extra thickness, kai, which means to say this is more about engineers. You learn this in engineering school, that it's not 1 plus 1. Don't think that every amma gives us every tefach gives us 1 and less than amma, and therefore just like 5 amas thick gives us 4 amas, I would say 6 amas gives us 6 amas. No, it doesn't work like that. That 1 extra amma is so powerful that it could go suddenly from 4 amas to 30. That's how engineering works. So, frak the Gemara. Now we're going to get a little sidetracked in the Gemara because we started going to the base of Mikdash. Why in the base of Mikdash wasn't there this beautiful Amatraxin? What happened in the base of Mikdash? They did not make a wall. They made a parecha. They had a parechas in the second base of Mikdash. So for the Gemara, the second base of Mikdash was much taller, the height, than 30 amas. Kika kai betlosin kai. The Amatraxin could only hold a max of 30 amas. Tzvei loy kai. The second base of Mikdash was 40 amas. Rashi brings down somewhere that it's 100 amas, but the Taisus Yom Tov in Mishnah says that Rashi used a tos and a tfus, which means that we made a mistake. It didn't say kuf. Rashi says kuf amma. It really said mem, which means 40. And it was a mistake in the print. In those days, print wasn't so clear. And it was only 40 amas in the second base of Mikdash. But the point we're trying to bring out is that 40 amas is much taller than 30 amas, and therefore 6 amas cannot withhold 40 amas. So, first of all, the Gemara wants to know, how do we know, first of all, that second base of Mikdash was taller? For the Gemara source, it's talking about the second base of Mikdash. It's a pasuk in Tanakh and Chagai. Which means to say is the second base of Mikdash is going to be much more greater. And there's a machlokes. What does it mean greater? Rav Shmuel v'Amri lo. Some say it was Rabbi Yechim Elazar. Chad Amar b'binyan. Some want to say it was greater in the binyan itself, which means to say it's like what we're understanding. It was 40 amas instead of 30 amas. The Chad Amar, we're flipping the page. We're going on Amud Beis Bishanim. That the second base of Mikdash was for how many years? 420 years. However, the first base of Mikdash was 410. The Isalah, and the Gemara finishes up by saying they're both right. Whether it was years and height, the second base of Mikdash was greater. So the second base of Mikdash was 420 years it stood, and 40 amas. The first base of Mikdash was 410 and 30 amas high. Now that we mentioned the 30 amas, the Gemara is going to continue to discuss the second base of Mikdash about the Perechas. V'nevdu tlosin amen bebinyan, v'idach nami nevid Perechas. For the Gemara, I got it. I'll accept, I'll concede that after 30 amas, the engineer won't approve to put up, because it's only 6 tvachim, to put up higher wall.
I would think that if somebody smashes into it or does something, that would cause it to go down. But are we talking about if it stood up there and naturally fell? It doesn't. We don't say that.
I'll answer you. Can you put up a wall 200 feet high and naturally fall if it's not a strong foundation, if the thickness is only a foot or two? It won't last. It won't last. So that's what we're worried about. If you might be right, it might stand up for a day. But what's going to happen is it's going to weaken very quickly, and it's going to be a danger, and so eventually going to fall. The second one was
stronger than
It was never stronger. It was taller. It was taller and still longer. So taller is an issue. Like Julie himself said that the taller it is, the stronger the foundation. You have to make it, right? Same thing with everything today. When you make a fence, the taller the fence is, it has to have stronger materials. SS40, SS20, PS40. These are schedules in the thickness of the materials.
They both were destroyed by outsiders. It wasn't that
The Beis Hamikdash was eventually destroyed. We're not talking about getting the Beis Hamikdash destroyed. We're worried about the engineers approving the Beis Hamikdash. The built. That's the issue. So the question was, we conceded, we said, okay, engineers, all right? We're talking to the engineers of Mikdash. We say, no problem. We can't build a wall over 30 amas because we only have a max of 6 tfach. That's the reality. However, let's build a wall 30 amas and the rest, build the pareiches.
maybe when you look at the skyline of New York, they now have such thin, narrow buildings. It's amazing that they don't fall down by the winds.
Right, because the materials and the way it's structured, it's above my pay grade, this whole engineering. But if you go up to a high story in the city on a windy day, you will actually feel the shaking. You will, the buildings do shake. It literally does move. But we're relying on engineers. Also, the foundation is much deeper. The World Trade Center, the foundation is. Go check it out now. It's
such a beautiful building now.
Yes, it's stunning.
It's stunning.
Stunning. Okay, let's get back on track over here and work with the engineer. Let's concede that we can only do 30 amas of stone structure, but let's build the pareiches afterwards. Fan for the Gemara, ki katloisin amasa nami agav tikru maziva. Ein achanami. But beloy tikru maziva, loy havikai. Which means to say is, wait a second, you know what holds up a wall? If we look at the surrounding walls in this, even in the room we're currently in, there's a ceiling, right? There's a ceiling that's holding up the partition. So when you have a floor and you have a ceiling, it's much easier for the walls to be stronger. If, however, there's going to only be a pareiches and no ceiling, then, or plaster, right? If we look over here, we have a ceiling, we have plaster. So it holds up the wall much stronger. But without a wall and a ceiling, without a ceiling and plaster, then it's not going to hold up. Amar Abaya. Abaya wants to give so for more a different question. Okay, not 30 amas. That I'll take. So don't do 30. Engineer, give me a number that you do agree will stand. 10 amas, 15 amas, 5. Give me a number. Throw me something. Make a beautiful stone structure. The rest will do pareiches. So Abaya said, you know what? I have a different reason. Gemiri. We have a tradition that what? Here we have more than usually Gemiri means an oral tradition. Balpeh. Hilchos Gemiri law, right? That means to say halacha mishmasina. But here we have we have a pasuk that tells us this. Ikulu bebinyan memigdash, ikulu bepareiches memishkan, which means to say we have psuk in the Beis Hamikdash. We're learning out that everything has to be bebinyan, or you cannot mix the two. That the partition was either created by the Beis Hamikdash, was created bebinyan, and entirely pareiches. We have psukim to tell you this. We learn it now from Ayin Sham in the psukim and Shemais. Therefore, we can't do half and half. Okay. Now we're going back to another question in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah tells us the thickness of the walls again is 6. It's 6. It's either 6 tfachim, either it's 3, either it's 5 tfachim, or it's 4 tfachim, or it's 3 tfachim. Now,
where's the tfachim? At the bottom?
The bottom, yeah. Tfachim means the thickness. So how thick is the wall? Each one gives 3 and 3 equals 6 tfachim. We're giving the land space. That's the main point. The question becomes how much size am I, now after when we build a beautiful brick, you have to put on plaster. So the Gemara is going to discuss how substantial the plaster is, but that's the reality, that you have to put on a little plaster on the walls. The Gemara is going to question plaster. You need it to withhold, it protects the structure, correct. It's part of the material, it's a basic understand that it's part of the structure. But the Gemara's questioning now we have a simple question now. How thick is the brick? Does the brick need to be 3 tfachim? That's what the Mishnah says, including the plaster, 3 tfachim, which means the brick could be 2 3 minus plaster, whatever the numbers will be, whatever the thickness of the plaster, whatever the measurements are, which we're going to talk in a moment. Or 3 tvachim each plus the plaster, which makes a difference. You have to remember, Julie, we're not talking about a big chutzner. We're talking about a chutzner that you already gave 1/12 of your space, so we're not talking about a lot. So you don't want to give as much space as you could go. You don't want to do that. So the Gemara is questioning now, when it says 3 tefachim in the Mishnah, is it including the plaster or not? Frak the Gemara as follows: I boiluhu hein v'sidan idil mahein b'lai sidan.
How big is the platform?
Let's go right into it. The Gemara is going to answer that it's not so substantial. Let's go into it.
It acts as not a buffer.
It's a weather protectant.
Right.
You need plaster just like every. I'm not a builder.
That thick.
Correct. And that's really the Gemara is going to come out with. We're going to try to say is like, it's so not substantial a measurement. We're talking about, you take a ruler, it's like, there's nothing there, and that's why the Mishnah didn't see it. Let's see it inside. So this is the question: is the Mishnah, when it says 3 tefachim, is it including the plaster? It means it is including the plaster. Let it say its measurements before Julie's going to quickly protest and say, "Come on, the measurements is not so thick." But Rav Nachman wants to say, "Tell us, the measurement of the plaster." Say you need to put in shleisha tefachim v'sidan. It should say that in the Mishnah. Elash ma'minayim v'sidan. For the Gemara, no, lam. Like Julie wants to say, you don't. 3 is without plaster. Even the have a tefach, since it's not even a tefach, that's how small it is. Laitani. So the Gemara quickly pounces in it. You tell me only when there's a tefach where the Mishnah gives measurements. We know not. Vaktani belavein by bricks. Then I say. The Mishnah does say shiurim under a tefach. Fan for the Gemara, hasam chazilitz the rufe. By a half a tefach and a half a tefach equals a tefach. Mashenkin over here, like Julie's saying, come on, how much are we talking about the plaster? Plaster is such a minute amount. That's not a substantial amount of a measurement that the Mishnah is not going to even be busy with it. Okay, it's not a significant amount. The Gemara still wants to work and try to bring another raya. Tashma. Now we're going to learn about an Erevin. Okay, this is an earlier mission in Erevin where it talks about where you want to make a mavi. Something called a mavi, which gives us a heter. We're not going to go deep into Erevin. We're not going to get sidetracked. But the point is, in Hilchas Erevin, you have to put on a beam on top of your courtyard. Okay, that's Hilchas Erevin. I do not want to step into that realm. A beam. Yeah, and they might even have a picture. I do a cross beam, correct. They have a beautiful picture, a beautiful illustration. This is called a mavi. Does everyone see the mavi? These are houses that you walk into. This is the courtyard, the rechava. You see how on top you have to put a beam? They tell you they're abundant, they tell you have to put a beam. The question becomes is how thick does this beam need to be? It needs to be a substantial beam. So the Gemara and the Mishnah and Erevin tells us. Yeah, you put on top of the 2 walls, but could you put a little thin beam or a substantial beam? And the Gemara tells us the Mishnah tells us how thick the beam needs to be. Rechba has to be wide enough. Kedei lekabel ariach. It has to be wide enough that it needs to put on a size of a brick. So the ariach we all know is chatzi levein shegam tefach. So it has to be clearly the beam needs to be 1.5 tefach. So, and clearly over there, let's be real, clearly over there, we're not talking about plaster because it just tells us how thick the beam needs to be. But it doesn't tell, there we're not talking about a real wall. And clearly there's no plaster over there. So you clearly see that the Mishnah, where it talks about the measurements, is not including plaster. Fan for the Gemara, no. Hasam, be'ravravsa. There's many types of bricks. Over there, we're talking about a larger size brick, and that's 3 tvachim wide. Our Mishnah tells us how thick does the brick need to be? 3 tvachim. Why does our Mishnah need to tell us a measurement? Just say a brick. if there was the standard number of a brick, there wasn't option size in the store, the Gemara would just say you have to give a brick. We all know bricks to Tfachim. From there we could see from our Mishnah already where it says the size of the brick, we know that they're smaller size bricks. Therefore, our Mishnah, which does not explicitly say, must be talking about 3 Tfachim. Hence, our Mishnah, which says 3 Tfachim, is including the layer of plaster. So our Mishnah is coming out, we're looking at Hein Visidan. So even though Julie's not going to like that plaster is not such a measurement, but we clearly see from a different point that the Mishnah didn't have to tell us the size. The Mishnah could have just said a brick. Elamai, there are small types of bricks. And the Mishnah wants to tell us clearly, you know what, it has to be the final measurement needs to be of the brick. It needs to be 3 tfachim, which includes the plaster. So it comes out, you're working with a brick that's 2.8.
What is that you showed us?
This picture of Mavli? Yeah, this is by a Mavli, which means a beam on top. The beam needs to be 1.5 tfachim.
When we do that?
We do that on Shabbos to eat, in order to carry. That's for Shabbos.
It has nothing to do with the fields.
It has nothing to do with the basra. I said, I don't want to go in, but we're bringing a raya that the beam over there, the measurement for sure doesn't have plaster. Because there's no plaster, because there's no wall. So we're able to bring a raya over there. Okay, now we're actually going to go into something called, it's a little of a gadatas. This is going to be much more easier, the flow of the next section of the shir, because it's going to talk about it's going to talk about shuls. We're going to get into hoarders. We're going to get into fascinating subjects, which has nothing to do with blah, blah. So let's not get lost in fields, chazaka. But once we touched architecture and everything and remodeling the base of Mikdash, the Gemara many times gets sidetracked, and starts going into subjects that's not really, what we're trying to accomplish, but that's part of the Gemara's. Now we're going to go into a fascinating Gemara.
The plaster that we're talking about, what is its purpose?
So I mentioned the purpose is weather resistant. If you're going to have a brick without a plaster, eventually it's going to erode. It's going to get destroyed based on weather, based on bugs, based on the grass. Plaster is a protectant. It's a protectant.
But it's I don't know what they use then.
They use I would say similar to today's plastic.
You can put you can paint it on.
So even today we use plaster a lot. We do use plaster. If people do renovations, you always see they're always putting on a little plaster. But
on the inside.
So I don't know. Right. Today could be our materials are much stronger and better. Our materials are already today made weather resistant. Those days it was much more organic.
How do you compare it to?
Right. Today's materials were much more advanced, much more ahead of the advanced technologies even in every material. So, but in those days they needed the plaster for weather. I would assume for weather protecting.
They're really not talking about too much.
No, not a substantial measurement for sure. Way less than a tefach. Because that's what we wanted to say. That it could be I would say it's possible. It's even a quarter of a tefach. It's very possible it was, a good. I would say half an inch, which is much more thicker than today. Today everything is so minute that we don't even really understand the bickering that's going on between the two parties.
Could even be sprayed on.
Right. Today we have spray. Today we're not. Technology is way more advanced, even in the construction material. Let's go into to shuls. Now, we're going to discuss that we do not want to demolish a knesses, a synagogue. A beis knesses is a place where we go daven. We do not want to destroy it until we have another beis hamikdash in place. And the Gemara is going to give 2 fascinating reasons why are we concerned for destroying the beis hamikdash. The Gemara is going to say one concern is we're worried what's going to happen is if you destroy a beis hamikdash, beis knesses, you destroy beis knesses, and then what happens is a lot of times we have projects, we're very excited, we're all passionate. It fizzles out, our excitement wanes. We got used to davening in the garage. Suddenly we have to go beg people for money. You know what? We say, let's stick to where we are. So therefore, because of that concern, that we don't want it to be that we're going to end up getting negligence in building a beautiful beis knesses, there's a halacha, now let it destroy it till your beautiful beis knesses is up and running. That's one reason. Another reason they want to say is that we're worried. Where else are you going to daven? You have nowhere to daven. We don't want it to be that in those days it wasn't simple to find. Today, everywhere you go, they pop up a tent, they pop up a garage, we have a beautiful stand-up minyan. In those days didn't have them. We were very nervous that people had to walk. It wasn't that we lived in bungalows and colonies and everything. You had to walk in far, and people would end up, not davening b'tzibur. So let's see it inside. Omer of Chizda le'listar inish be'kanishta. Ad deboni be'kanishta chriti. A community should not destroy their shul until they rebuild another shul. Ikadamri, someone is saying mishum peshusa, like I explained to you, you get negligent, and you don't want to build a new shul. You guys get lazy, and it's harder. Ikadamri mishum tzeluya, you have nowhere to daven, and we're worried, especially, comes the winter months, you're going to come out, and no one's going to want to go daven. My binai, what's the practical ramifications? Ika binai, the ika bekanishta achriti, where you do have another structure in between. So according to the first reason, like today, where you have a garage, right? You have a garage shul, it's a beautiful stand-up. So let's be real, even today, people get used to davening garage shuls. Everything's worked out, they figured out the bathroom, they remodeled it without the permit, no one caught them, everything's great. They don't want to do any, they don't want to be busy with it. But the second reason that you have nowhere else to build, that you have nowhere to daven, they have a garage minion, it's covered, they even have air conditioning units, they're fine. And then we're going to continue with the fascinating incident that happened. Maremar Umar Zutra Sasru Huvanu. They demolished, they rebuilt Be Kaita, Be Sisvasa. In the winter, those days they had different types of shuls. Today we have air conditioning, we have a heating system, we have HVAC, it's great. But in those days, they had to really be concerned about the winds and about the weather. So they had two different shuls. One for the summer, which was, I would call it, the way I'm picturing is like those, what's those called? Like, outside we have that, like the, gaguza, what's that? There's a word for it, a gazebo. I was thinking, there we go, a gazebo, which is, there's a bunch of screens and windows. It's a beautiful place it's shady. I'm picturing those days they had a bunch of gazebos for the summer, and in the winter they built it very deep underground, like that. There's no, the wind will go above it. So they had two different places. So in the summer, they destroyed the winter one. They demolished and they were able to build it. So they each had it like that. They had a temporary. So you clearly see he wasn't worried about the negligence. He was only worried about the second reasoning where he had nowhere to daven. Now, we want to know, we said that we're going to go back into the first reason of negligence. It's going to be hard to raise funding. Ravina asked Rav Ashi, what happens in a scenario, Gavizuzi, you already made a charity campaign, and now you already have it in the bank account, all the money. Do we say now that you already have the funds, we could destroy the shul because the money is ready in a secure bank account? Rav Ashi answered him, no, we know what we're afraid of. Dilma misramiluhu pidyon shvuim yavaluhu. The halacha is pidyon shvuim takes precedence over everything. Therefore, in a case of chas v'shalom, you have a case of pidyon shvuim, you must release the funds, and then you're back to square one where there's no fund. Believe me, if you made a crowdfunding campaign and you guys already killed yourselves to raise the money, and then they have to give a pidyon shvuim, they're not raising the money again. They're sitting in their shed. It's going to be even a kol shekid, they're not going to want to rebuild it. What happens? Shriga livni, you already paid the money for the materials, it's sitting there. Vahadri hudri. Umachsi kashuri means to say the bricks are already stacked. Vahadri hudri, the rafters already placed. Umachsi, and the beams already, everything you pass by, the trucks already deposited, all the construction materials are just waiting for the laborers to pull up. Amalei again. Zimnin de misramalu pidishuim, the halach is mizavni v'yavlu, you must sell the construction materials. So he was bothered. Amalei. Ihachi, afilu baninami. If that's the case, then even every shul you maybe have to sell the shul and make it an auction. I'm like, no. There's a din shiloi mizavni. Pidyon shvuin, there's a limit. You know what the limit is? When to have the construction is complete. Therefore, you must wait it. Loi mizavni. Where 4 lines before the Y lines in Art Scroll, it's going to be page 3B3. However, we're gonna bring out a very important exception to these halachas. Veloy amar, and this whole shakla v'tari, the back and forth we're having regarding rebuilding a shul, is we're not talking about where it's a dangerous. There's a problem with the structure. If you start seeing cracks in the foundation, you immediately put a stop order. No one can walk into the shul. We have to destroy the shul. We're not going to, it's sakana. We're not going to have to, there's nothing to discuss. It's unsafe. How do we know this? Kihadar of Ashi, what happened was there was an incident, the Masa Machzad, which is a city. Sasri immediately put a stop order, demolished it, but he was very smart. What did he do? He went upstairs. You know what he did? He went quickly to the new site. Even though it wasn't pleasant for him, he brought his little mat and he slept there. The loy afki never left until they literally did the roof gutters, which means to say the last moment till it was completely done. When every last detail was accomplished, that's when he went back to his home, because he knew that if he's staying in the base of Knesset sleeping, they're going to make sure, they're going to quickly finish it. Because imagine the Gadol Adar is sleeping in the base of Knesset. We're going to make sure to quickly build it. Now we're going to go into the sugya of Baba and Vuta. We're going to go, in Yirtzeh Hashem, we're going to try to finish the incident, a fascinating incident with the base of Mikdash. Let's go into Bava ben Vuta. Bava ben Vuta was a big tzaddik. And what happened was, he told Hordus, we're going to see, that's why we're going to bring this incident. It was a fascinating incident we're about to see with Hordus, who is an Eved. But we're going to see later on the incident that Bava ben Vuta, he actually blinded him. Very, very cruel. He blinded him with a porcupine. He took the I think it's like a type of animal with thorns, and he poked out his eyeballs to make him blind, in order that he shouldn't be able to rebel against him. But when he wanted to do tshuva at the end of the incident, we're jumping to the end of the incident because that's where we're going on now. He gave him advice to rebuild the second base of Mikdash. He first told him to destroy it and rebuild it. So the question is, we just learned a moment ago, you're not able to raise the base of Knesset's orbit until you have another one. So the question is, how did he give him such advice? How did he give him an eitzah to Hordus? To destroy the base of Mikdash. We just learned a moment ago. Fan for the Gemara, easy out. One teretz was the base of Mikdash already had cracks in the foundation, like we said. You must destroy and rebuild it. The main issue we had in the first teretz of the Gemara was that we're going to be negligent, and we're not going to have the energy to do a crowdfunding campaign and go raise money. The Melech is powerful; he has unlimited funds. We're not worried about that. How do we know? The Amr Shmuel, the Amr Machusaf, the Melech would say Akrana Turi. Melech would say even something crazy like, "We're going to destroy this mountain." He would spend substantial sums just to prove his point, which means to say is, we all know the feds, they have unlimited money. They print more money. They do whatever they want regarding construction. Now we're going to go into the story of this fascinating story of Hordus. Let's jump right in. Hordus Avda the base Cheshmenoi Hav. Hordus was an Eved. He was an Eved of the Cheshmenoim. Now, just to we're going to learn it quickly. We're going to go through note 36 in Art Scroll. Julie doesn't have it, but we're going to say it outside. Fascinating history, regarding the years of the Beis Hamikdash. The Cheshmenoim, they did a revolution against the Greeks. The Greeks was the Yiddish nation at the time. They were the oppressors of the Yiddish nation that was led by Matisyahu, named Matisyahu the Kohen Gadol. It was the year of 165 BCE. The years of 3597. What happened in that year? The Beis Hamikdash was recaptured, and we all know Hanukkah happened. Hanukkah happened the year of 165. Kuf Samachay 3597. However, it took 20 years to achieve final military victory. Yet Hashem with Hamas will have a much quicker victory. But in the year of 140, which was prior to that, the Cheshmenoim, the Sanhedrin proclaimed that Shimon, he was the last surviving son of Matisyahu. He is the new Melech, Prince of the Jews. and we were able to rule until the year 3725, which is 36 BCE. What happened? This is the year we're talking about, the year of 36 BCE, 3725. Hordus came up. And now we're going to go into this. Gemara Hordus continued until the year 36 BCE. From 36 BCE until 68 CE, which is 3725 till 3828. So it's a good almost 103 years. And then the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed by the Romans. So good, he had it for 103 years. Now let's dwell, now that we know the history, let's jump right in to Hordus. Hordus was an Evid. Nasan Einav Ba'isitinaikis. We're going to explain the motivation for what happened, but he saw this beautiful girl. Yoim Echad, Shama Hu Gaver Baskol Adami. You heard of Baskol and it said, Kol Avdo Demorid. Any Eved that doesn't rebels currently, Hashto Matzach. Today he'll be Matzliach. Will succeed. So Kam Katlinu Lakulu Marvasi quickly exterminated and did a terrible attack against the Cheshmonaim. However, Vishar Yolahi and Kunusi left this girl. He left this girl. So there's a beautiful Maharsha who explains that why he left this girl is that we all know that if a person, Evan, marries his master, he automatically becomes free. So he was an Evan. An Evan can't really be a Melech. So he thought he was a very smart fellow. He said, let me marry my master, which is, she's a part of the Cheshmonaim, and I'll automatically be free. And like that, I'll be a true king. But she realized what happened. When this girl saw what was happening, she figured out the Kabbalah mitzvah he was going to marry her. Salika Legra, she ran up to the roof. Virama Kolon, she got up and she screamed and she said, Amra. She said the following statement called Man de Asi V'Amar. Any person that comes and says me Beis Chashmenoi Kasino, whoever comes up and says I'm from part of the Chashmenoim, Avduhu, he's really an Eved. How do we know this? The only person left of was this woman, which is me. And this woman unfortunately committed suicide and she jumped off for a roof and died. And that's what happened. And that's after she said that statement, she jumped off the roof and she died. What happened to the body? Tamna Sheva Shnin Bidvusha. Hordus went and literally deposited her body into honey to preserve her body for 7 years. Why did he do that? Ikadamri, he did it for physical pleasures. Baalel.
Was it that, or as long as she wasn't found, he's considered.
Ikadamri, Julie, you're too quick for us. Ikadamri Baalel. Some say he did it for physical pleasures. Ikadami loy bala. He wasn't doing it for, you know why he did it for? Like you were saying. Dami law, ikadami law loy bala. Ikadami bala had the tamna liyusuli, it's for physical pleasures. Ikadami loy bala hide the tamna. You know why? Like Julie said, this is my wife. Look at her. You see, I even look. Everyone wants to see my wife. Okay, now we're going to go into the incident of Baba Ben Vuta. Omar man darish. Hordus said to himself, who is the one who said, Mikarev achecha tasim alecha melech. What happened was, if you look in the Torah, clearly states that a guy is not allowed to become a melech of us, only a yid. Mikarev achecha, only from the midst of your brothers you can make a person. So Hordus was saying, okay, who's the people that said that basically me, an Eved, can't become a melech? Rabbanon. So you know what he did? He was nervous that Rabbanon is going to go and rebel against him. They're going to gang up. So come Katlinu Lakula Rabbanon, he went and he slaughtered. He was very powerful at the time. And he slaughtered all the Rabbanon. But Shafke Lebaba Mevuta, Lemishkal Eitzamine, he was a very selfish person. He knew if I kill all the Jews out, we're not going to have like today. If the BDS was successful, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Everything's created with Jews. Technology, that's what we try making fun of these liberals.
Don't say too loud.
Okay.
That brings anti-Semitism.
Right. But Shavke the Baba Mutul Mishkal Eitzimine Amalei Kalila Dali Diali Nakrina Lane. However, he was very cruel. He went and he put around his head thorns to pop out his eyeballs. Like that, he's weak. He's not going to be able to rebel. Yes, like that, he incapacitated. Wow. Okay, but he still was very worried that Bava Mevuta was still very powerful, even though he was blind. So what did he do? He started to trick him. Bava Mevuta, Yom Echad, now that he was blind, Yosef Kameh, he went in front of him. He made believe he was a regular stranger, and he said, Amar, Chazi Mai Hai of the Bisha Meikav, look at this the wicked Eved, what he did to you. He's basically saying about the king. So Amar, what should I do? Curse him. And we all know, even if you curse, if he would curse, he would die. But I can't. It says, even in your thoughts, do not curse a melech. What do you mean? I love melechu. He's not a melech, he's a slave. Let him be just at least like a rich person. And it says it regarding rich people. In your bedrooms, so he answered back, let him be a prince. Right? Oh, and he answered back, and were you only a leader, I still wouldn't curse him. A leader among your people, you should not curse. Even though he's not a royalty, he's not Velachishmanim, he's still the leader. That's the reality, and you don't curse him. But he answered, Amalei, what do you mean? So heard this answer back, it's only when he's doing, Maisim. I love Maisim. He's not acting in your manner. He's wicked. So why don't you curse him? I'm afraid of him. He might find out. There's no one here. We're only two people in the room. A fascinating which means to say, it's like he's basically trying to say, you never know, even the little birdies, they can hear it and go talk. It's an expression. So he realized who he's dealing with.
Yeah, I'm surprised he blinded himself. He could have made believe he did it.
Who could have made it? He didn't blind himself. Hortus went and blinded him physically. He tied his hands behind his back, took porcupines, and pulled out his eyeballs.
I understand what I'm saying. He could have just made it believe it, considering that he was so powerful and all. Didn't have to blind himself completely.
Who? I'm not understanding the question. Hortus, yeah. Hortus blinded Bava Mevuta because he was afraid of him.
Oh, he did not himself.
No. He was afraid of the God of Bava Mevuta is going to come if he's not blind. He's powerful. So he wanted to a certain degree compensate him.
Are you doing the whole down?
So no, what we're planning on doing is because I mentioned yesterday a typical Shabbos we're going to be giving shir because I live across the street.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yes, so we're planning on doing 7 days a week, 365. Yes, Hashem, we're hoping not to do breaks. I do have a wedding at the end of August, so maybe it might be an option. I could always give it virtually if the rabbi is sewing in if it's going to be for 2-3 days, because it's going to be out of town, to maybe put up a screen and I will continue the share regularly just for a few days. No.
There is here somewhere. He did adoption. He does it for us in Florida.
Okay, perfect, right.
Here also.
Right. So either we could have a Mimal and Makkah, we'll figure it out at the time. But so this Shabbos, I'm not going to be here. We're going to continue. Whoever wants to stop. This Shabbos, I am not going to be here. So I want to go a little more because on Sunday, we're going to have